Hello everyone, welcome. My name is Jacinta Thompson and I'm the Executive Director and Events and Exhibitions Producer for the Bob Hawke Prime Ministerial Centre. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to the Hawke Centre and the University of South Australia. In doing so, I take this opportunity to acknowledge that the University of South Australia is on the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land, and we acknowledge that they are of continuing importance to the Kaurna people living today. Tonight, Rosie Batty, AO, will be in conversation with Tansley, CEO of the Zahra Foundation, as they discuss Rosie's latest book, Hope. And a warm welcome to you both, Rosie. Lovely to have you back here at the Hawke Centre. The Hawke Centre is pleased to be co-presenting tonight's event with the Zahra Foundation, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank Kellyanne, thank you Kellyanne, and your team for their support in making tonight's event possible. The session is being recorded and a video will be available on the Hawke Centre website next week. I encourage you to bring this to the attention of your friends, colleagues who could not join us tonight. We are also live streaming this presentation and I welcome our online audience. Hello, all of you out there. There's quite a few. I think we may be up to 300 people out there watching, so welcome. As we are recording, can I please ask that you switch your phones to silent to avoid interruptions. Copies of Hope will be available for purchase in the foyer and Rosie will be signing post-event. And now, a very warm welcome to Rosie Batty and Kellyanne Tansley. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacinta. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the land of the Kaurna people and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also to remind the audience here with us this evening and those streaming in that Aboriginal women are 36 times more likely to be hospitalised due to domestic and family violence. It is our nation's shame and we can do better and we will do better. And conversations like tonight hopefully can lead us on that path. So it's an absolute privilege and also really emotional, Rosie, to be here with you this evening. In 2014, Luke's life was taken and it shocked our nation. And you had the incredible courage to come out and speak up and work with the media on change. 10 years on, you released your book called Hope. And I know, as a professional in the sector, I joined Specialist Domestic and Family Violence Services back in 2013, so just the year prior to Luke's homicide and 2 years prior to you becoming Australian of the Year. And in recent times, we're looking at statistics of one woman being murdered every 4 days. And to be in the industry and see these statistics and listen to the media, I don't think there was any better timing for your book launch and in reminding us the importance of hope. And I know myself, just before Christmas, wanting to give up on hope. We lost 5 women in 1 week here in South Australia. And then reading your book at the start of the year in preparation for this evening reminded me the importance of holding on to hope and how much change has occurred over those 10 years. And spearheaded mostly with your advocacy and the collaboration you had with others. I guess my first question to you is, how did you come to the title of Hope for your book and how have you held hope after the last 10 years?
Big questions. Can you hear me okay? I feel like I'm going to swallow this thing. Sorry. I'm not going to be doing aerobics, so I think I can manage. How did I arrive at the title of Hope? Well, actually, the idea of writing a book was during one of our lengthy lockdown periods in Victoria. You might remember that little thing called COVID that we were dealing with. And the person I was looking to write the book with suggested the title Grace. And now this is before Grace Tame, I will say.
Want to?
I really... Thank you. Malfunction. I really didn't feel that I could genuinely say I've been graceful through a lot of the journey since losing Luke. Some of my responses and actions have been far from graceful. And somewhere along the line I came up with the word hope, and the intention of the book was always about holding on to hope, I guess, and looking at what hope means. And you certainly know when you've lost hope. You certainly know when you feel powerless and life seems pointless. And I think for me, being able to keep hold of hope often is looking back from where we've come from.
Yeah.
And that's what I've endeavoured to do with the book, and more recently reminding people that even though the statistics are really deeply confronting, shocking, on every level, we are still in a better place than we were 10 years ago when I started talking out about family violence after losing Luke. So hope is something we all need to have, but it's not a continuous state of being. I could have called the book Despair. And sometimes I do despair. But hope is always not far away. And I think we give each other hope. And sometimes when we really feel things are beyond our reach or too tough, it's invariably someone and something like that that will give us hope again. And I can say that, you know, during my journey, I've had amazing support from family and friends. And as humans, we need each other. We need to know that we matter. We need to know that people love us. We need to know that we can lean on each other for support, and that through the toughest of times, there's going to be someone there to say that you're not alone. And that's what's helped me get through the toughest of times. And there have been incredibly tough times. Times when you really question that you're ever going to feel okay again.
And throughout the book, there's a lot of those times you've shared, but I want to take you back. So 2014, you know, prior to Luke's homicide, you're an average British/Australian woman.
It was never average.
Nobody's average, that's very true. But, you know, you're a mum, you're working, you're living life, and then you experience the most horrendous incident of trauma, harm and crime, you know, completely unimaginable. And the next day, you're thrust in front of the media, and everybody wants to hear from you. In the book, you talk about feeling like you was just going to tell the media where to go, but you didn't, Rosie. You spoke up and started advocacy from day one. Can you take us back to that time?
Yeah, I wish I could say I had a plan or an agenda or even knew what was going to come out of my mouth, but I didn't. And I did intend perhaps to just ask the media to politely leave. But they very kindly and very compassionately just asked me if there's anything I wanted to say. I had done a diploma in community welfare. I had studied family violence as an elective subject, so I had a knowledge of the theory of family violence. I was as qualified probably as any professional about family violence, because it isn't a subject that is a core subject in a lot of those, and even social workers don't have an enormous amount of expertise in family violence. So I was probably as well equipped as anybody. But for some reason I did choose to say that family violence can happen to anyone, no matter how nice your house is or how intelligent you are. It can happen to anyone and everyone. I think, you know, from what I understand, being able to put this into the context of family violence was the first time it had ever happened. And so the media were able to frame it into that context, and it really changed a lot of the reporting and the conversations we started to have. And I've always understood that the reason I was heard that day and the reason I did shock a lot of people across Australia was because I was that white, middle-class, privileged woman. If I'd been an Aboriginal woman, if I'd been another woman from another culture, another coloured skin, people wouldn't have been stopped in their tracks like they were with me, because back then we still had a lot of myths around family violence. We were still had a lot to learn. And I guess that's part of the conversation that started, which people recognised me for. I was unsure whether I'd said some things that, you know, were, I don't know, it was a bit scary talking to the media.
Talk to us about that. So, you know, no prior media experience. I know no coaching in terms of how to, you know, talk to people about your experience. But it, you know, it seems back then a real strong desire and passion that you understood immediately that there was messaging we needed to hear as a nation. This topic needed to come from behind closed doors. It was important that we started to be aware that anybody can be impacted by domestic and family violence.
I don't think in that moment I had all those thoughts.
No. So,
I don't think I did, but somewhere it came from it.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that I did. It very quickly, within days, I realised that the media had a lot of interest, but a lot of people wanted to speak to me, and I felt compelled to keep talking. I thought there'd be some interest, and I didn't know how long that interest would last for. I certainly didn't think I'd be here 10 years later, still really talking about family violence. And a lot of the messaging is still as relevant and is still the same.
absolutely.
Which can be a little tiring. But I think, you know, not everybody would want to do what I've done. Not everyone has either the opportunity to do what I was able to do. Luke's father was killed by the police, so I didn't have to worry about a trial. I was free to speak. And people want to hear you in a genuine, real way.
Yeah.
Politicians can be contrived. They have agendas. They talk spin. we get tired of listening to that. But when you're talking with real depth of feeling, with a reality, it cuts through to people. It shocks people, and people relate when they have their own experiences that they may have not been able to share. They have not felt that they can address or talk about. It starts, their feelings start to feel validated and things. So there's been lots that I've learned over the 10 years, and I realised that, I was a single parent when I had Luke. I understand a lot of the challenges single mums have. It was a struggle to make ends meet and stay in my home. But I had been a sales and marketing person, and I'd learnt a lot about training and communications. So I guess what I realise is my strength and that I can do quite well is talk. And some people would say I can talk underwater with marbles in my mouth. But, and so some people, they have different skills. They do it in different ways. One of the things that I probably didn't realise is that, for some, they would be suspicious that I was choosing to channel my grief in this way.
Yes.
Because I think when we have children, we can't imagine anything happening to them. We do everything we can to make sure that they have the best life we can provide. And the thought of your child getting sick or having an accident or being harmed in any way is your greatest fear. So to me, having to live with the stigma and the reality of my child being murdered by his father is a very difficult thing to come to terms with for everybody. And I think that when something terrible happens, you can't imagine that life can continue. Mm-hmm. You can't imagine that person will ever be able to live properly again. And you probably expect that that person in their grief would be shut away. And I'm sure for many, that would be an understandable pathway. But I knew that if I let myself fall into that hole, I don't know whether I'd ever come out of it again. So I kind of come from this stoic British background, and I have, families that I guess model that kind of stoicism and strength. So I kind of dug deep and pushed forward, and it surprised me in time when I realised that some people blamed me for Luke's death, that I hadn't protected him enough, that in some way I had caused it. Now, I understand a lot more about victim blaming these days, but back then I couldn't understand how anyone could think I could possibly be to blame for Luke's murder.
Absolutely.
And I think I thought of Lindy Chamberlain quite a lot and realised, we didn't trust her grief. We didn't trust her reaction when her baby was taken by a dingo. She was stoic. We put her in prison for 3 years. 3 years of her life she would never get back. 3 years without being able to be a mother to her daughter and her children. So, we don't know, I guess, how we're going to deal with something until we find ourselves having to deal with it. And, there are things that I would have done differently now. But being able to channel my grief in trying to make sure that no one else has to go through the pain that I go through has given me purpose and meaning and a way forward. And I would do it again. I wish I could bring Luke back, but I can't. But what I can do is try and make sure that my experience counts for something and that Luke didn't die in vain.
And Rosie, you have done that time and time again. I know the impact in terms of other families who, including the founders of the organisation, I'm privileged now to be a CEO of, Aman and his sisters, seek refuge and comfort and counsel from you. Our charity being launched in 2015 when you was Australian of the Year, and I know you came to that launch and you was the keynote speaker, and I know from Aman in those early days of grieving his mother, you showed incredible hope and strength and courage that himself and his sisters then took forwards to continue their advocacy in this space and raising awareness. So that impact of sharing your story, I feel like I can say with a level of credibility, working on the front line back then and being in the industry, absolutely changed the narrative of domestic and family violence throughout our nation. Not only that, the way you shared your story and that strength, that courage, that determination, the honesty, the raw honesty when you would come out and speak so frequently, sometimes, as you make mention in your book, up to 4 speeches a day whilst grieving and coming to terms with your new reality, your new life, allowed us to move away from this mindset we had that domestic and family violence is an issue that is behind closed doors and a family matter, and that people who experience this are victims and they're passive and they're weak. You coined for me what a survivor is. And within the darkness, how there can be hope and strength. I am blown away at your ability to do that on a public platform as an Australian of the Year, as an advocate, whilst grieving for your son. And, you make mention that you didn't feel that the award of an Australian of the Year was something that you deserved. But you made the bloody most of it, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
You made sure that you was going to take that status and make change.
It's, some of us women have what we call imposter syndrome. You men don't know what it's like. But yeah, imposter syndrome. Your wonderful Adelaide person, Gillian Hicks, she was nominated at the same time as me.
Yeah.
But I won, and I thought, I felt conflicted because I felt I'd got the award because of what had happened to me, and I didn't feel deserving. And so it took a little bit of explanation that it wasn't because of what had happened to me, it was because of how I'd responded to what had happened to me through Luke's murder. And so I set out to make sure that this national platform, I wasn't going to let anybody down. And I still remember that wonderful person, Natasha Stott-Despoja, being absolutely thrilled for me. And so many women who'd been working across the family violence sector just recognising this moment in time, this recognition and the hope that was placed on my shoulders that we could create a momentum for change. And so I knew this was a moment that couldn't escape. And I was determined to use that platform in the best way that I could. And so in that year, which was in 2015, I did come here a few times, I spoke at over 250 events. And then the following year, I spoke at 180. And then I stopped counting. I knew through the eyes of a victim that there were many professions and professional people that needed to do better. Whether they were doctors and nurses, whether they were police or judiciary, whether they were teachers and principals, there were a whole load of people that needed to do better when they come in contact with a victim of family violence. They needed to know what to say, they needed to know how to recognise, they needed to know what to do, and they needed to do a lot more. And so that was what I was compelled to do. And those 250 speaking engagements were largely to maternal health nurses, to GPs, to everyone that I knew would benefit from hearing my story and would be compelled to go back and do something more. And that didn't count media interviews, and that didn't count meeting with politicians and prime ministers. So what I can say, it was an unsustainable schedule. It's bloody ridiculous. It nearly killed me. But I also can see now that I just couldn't rest. And people would be concerned for me. I wasn't the easiest person to be around. I was a woman on a mission, and I wasn't particularly looking after myself very well. And I didn't recognise which particular emotion I was juggling, whether it was PTSD or trauma or grief or just a little bit of anxiety. I had it all going. And I can look back now at that time and I can see I was distracting myself also through from grieving. And when people would, suggest to me, you really need to make time to grieve, it was a brave person that suggested that. I would be very irritated and very dismissive because this was a moment in time. There was plenty of time later that I could rest. But I can see now it was somewhat of a distraction because the pain I felt was enough. I didn't feel I could bear any more pain. So I would do it all again, but I'd try and have a little bit better balance. Say no a few more times.
Yeah.
But what an amazing journey it's been. And it's all been very bittersweet, I will say, because if it was in any other context, it would have been an amazing period of my life. As you said, I don't think I'd even ever spoken to politicians before. Barely knew who the Prime Minister was. I think he was Tony Abbott. That's time ago.
That would have been a tough time.
But, so I was very, very naive. And I guess, relying on my own intuition, but the support I got from so many people, but what really, really drove me was knowing that I was amplifying the voices of the family violence sector. I was constantly in communication with trusted allies and people that I knew could help me with handling the media, knowing that what I was saying was accurate, that it was informed, and I built on my knowledge. And I gained a much, much deeper appreciation over the many years of exactly the kind of discrimination and abuse so many women face that I will never know personally. And so I think, this is an amazing organisations that are constantly overstretched, always underfunded, stretched to the limits. And as much as we have one woman a week, one woman every 4 days currently being murdered, this has not just started to happen. This has happened since time began. But we are now more informed in how we're talking about it. We're recognising, we're calling it out, and you lovely people here tonight are here because you care and you want to be part of the solution and are part of the solution. But this is not a problem that's going to go away next year. It's a problem that's going to be with us for a long time.
Absolutely.
And I'll see you in another 10 years. I'll bring my third book. And then it will be called Despair.
Rosie and I have just spent 4 hours talking today. We are good friends. We met 3 or 4 years ago. I've had the absolute privilege to stay at Rosie's home. Rosie's coached me through some difficult times in leadership of DV services. So your wisdom you bring into these conversations, but your patience, Rosie, in terms of understanding that, the rates of gendered violence currently today are absolutely unacceptable. There is no excuse. We can do better. But it's not to say what we've been doing is necessarily wrong. It's understanding intergenerational change, attitudinal change, community change takes a long time.
And the complexities.
Yes.
What we now recognise and know and understand as average people about family violence, we did not understand. I mean, when I first started talking about this only 10 years ago, I think we were still thinking physical violence was the only real form of family violence. I think we all now know there are multiple forms of violence, equally as abhorrent, equally as unacceptable. We are now talking about coercive control.
Yes.
And that was something that only specialised organisations understood. I think we're still grappling with it, but we are talking about it and we are beginning to understand how sinister and dangerous it is. So I think, I can't remember the point where I was about to make.
Normalising the conversation, Rosie. Before we kicked off here tonight, I was having a quick chat with Jacinta, and I said, we may need a trigger warning for the audience. And Rosie, rightly so, pulled me up on that thinking. Because when we...
They don't need a trigger warning. They know why they're a walking trigger warning.
I'm sick of being a walking trigger warning. And, it made me reflect because there was a time when we're talking about mental health, it was such a taboo topic, and people knew family members, friends, colleagues, community members were struggling, but they were too worried to intervene because they're not a psychologist, they're not a counsellor, they're not a mental health professional. What do I do? And I go back to working in specialist services just before, the year Luke was murdered and before you was Australian of the Year. And I know from being on the front line then what you did for us as an industry, you took the conversation out into the public narrative. You put it into the media and you took away the shame and stigma over having this yarn. And we need to stop avoiding this. If we really want to see, our government's got an incredibly ambitious target, ending domestic and family violence within one generation. It really starts with being able to hold these conversations. It starts as uncomfortable as they are.
It's being uncomfortable and it's getting in touch with feelings. And, I guess not everybody wants to be upset or sad, but ultimately you can't go through life being numb.
Of course.
So I think, for me, I enjoy real conversations, deep conversations and discussions. I learn so much from people. I love going to hear other people talk. And always, there's so much to learn from each other. And when you share something about your own insights and feelings, somebody else will think, I feel that too. And somehow it helps. Somehow to know that you're not the only one experiencing that or thinking that or feeling that helps. And I'm hoping that, my book will bring some of that insight as well. I mean, I don't know how much patience I've genuinely got, my parents and my family might dispute that, but anyway.
They're not here tonight, are they?
No, and I'm probably not very patient with them anyway, but that's what brothers are like.
Yeah.
But, I am in my 60s, and I do think if you haven't got some insight and wisdom by now, well, I might as well give up. And, it's easy, isn't it, to be able to kind of give other people advice or be able to see other people's situation and offer some kind of support and suggestions. But when it's yourself, that's where the heavy lifting is. It's always going to be a learning journey. I'm always going to be a work in progress. I'm never going to be quite the perfect person that I have aspired to be. And I guess that's what keeps you humble, really, is knowing that at any time you might, there's something about yourself that you need to learn.
Humble, human, and relative. And I think that is why, we've seen enormous support of your book being launched. And I think it's that realness. People can relate to you. You've been very honest in times of the good times, the bad times, and the indifferent times.
I haven't told you everything, though.
Not everything.
There are some elements that I keep to myself. But, yeah, I think, I've always been an open and honest person. And I think that comes from, my family back in England, very down to earth, very, down to earth. And my dad's like that too. So I think staying true to yourself, I think that's really important, because that is, I think, what people really seek.
And, something we all aspire to do, but to do that in the public arena is incredibly challenging. I want to talk to you. You talk a little bit about the process of grief. Many would argue in the early days, that, and you said yourself, being thrust into the media, thrust into the public narrative was a distraction from grief. But within the book, you then touch on a different stage of grief, and that was during COVID lockdowns. You were in Victoria, it happened all of a sudden, and for the first time you found yourself in, that stillness, I guess. Can you share with us a little bit about that time? Because I know it was also when you was thinking about writing this book.
So I think, a busy person's often a busy person. They're always busy, and I'm probably that. And then COVID happened. I was working for the government at the time, and we kind of got our laptops, and they said, see you in a couple of weeks. How long are we going to be away for? Anyway, it ended up being 2 years. And I actually never did go back to that particular office. But all of a sudden, it was like a circuit breaker. And I think for many of us, it was quite welcome. I got to work remotely. I have a nice property, I've got my dogs, but I was living alone and quite isolated.
Yeah.
Because all my family were in the UK and stuff. But I think that I was like a lot of people. I spring cleaned every single inch of my house. I exhausted myself initially, but then I'd done all of that, and I'd made my bone broth soup, and I'd made my protein balls, and all these things, and then you're running out of jobs, and there was something that I needed to do, and that was really look at. Are we okay up there?
We've just heard. Somebody in the back audience has just fainted by the looks of things.
Yeah.
We'll just pause for a minute, if that's okay, just until...
Is there another?
Okay, we're going to carry on. The person's being taken care of, so we're going to just carry on.
Yeah, hopefully person's okay, but we've got people looking out for that person.
Yeah, there's several people around there trying to support, so we'll just continue with the show. Thank you. So it's COVID. You've done the spring cleaning.
Sorry, that's where we were at.
Have been made.
Yeah, so there was some of the things I hadn't got around to doing, which was really going more closely into Luke's things.
Yeah.
And there were some things that I hadn't been able to do, and that was look through, put some order into schoolwork and personal, very, very intimate things. And I guess what I did was deeply grieved.
Yes.
As I looked through his baby clothes and his albums and the things that I probably hadn't wanted to do. And I realised that probably that was another, I was thinking, gosh, grieving is like the layers of an onion. You don't realise there's still more to do and more to go. And I think, really at the end of the time, I was ready. I was ready to be able to go there, and I felt safe enough that I could. And I had no other distractions, so I guess the time was right. I think that's what we do, you do things as you're ready, and you do things as you can, and what feels right for you. And grieving is an individual process, and what works for me may not work for other people. But I don't think we know how to talk about grief very well, and I don't know that people always know what to say and how to support people. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from each other about how to be there through some really uncomfortable times. And I remember people used to say, I don't know what to say, and I think there is nothing to say.
Yeah.
But just being here, and just knowing that you care. So, so that was, that was only a few years ago, wasn't it? But I mean, so I think it did end up being a therapeutic time for me.
And and we can take that learnings in terms of the grief process into talking to victim survivors of domestic and family violence. Often people are saying, I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
And like you say, it's about the being still, listening, believing. There's not always.
So can we shift the conversation to a bit more brighter?
Okay, let's go. All right.
These poor people don't want to go home feeling too immersed in grief.
We're definitely going to shift the conversation. So what I want to shift the conversation to is talking about grace. And you touched on
about
it.
What?
Grace. Hold on with me, Rosie. Okay. We'll get there. We've been talking so much before tonight. You touched on this at the start. I read Julia Baird's book entitled Grace, and I know you've got it at home and you're waiting to read it.
Yet to open the pages.
Yeah, it's an incredible book, and Julia sets on defining what grace is and how important it is for us to recognise it and hold on to it. And in reading Julia's book and reading your book, Hope, I can't help but see that you are that beacon example of grace. Now, I know that originally the vision for the book was a little bit different to how it turned out. And I know originally people had suggested to you that title of grace. But during COVID, things changed in terms of writing the book Hope. You had envisioned for it to be based on people you had worked with, leaders, community members and others, but it became
I wanted the book to be about other people. I didn't want the book to be about me.
Yes.
I'd done a series on the ABC called Accidental Leaders, and I really wanted to take that. I've met some inspiring, amazing people that had really made an impact on me in my life. It helped me inspire me, I guess, to keep going, to know that life will be all right. I will get through this in some way, shape or form. I will feel again. I will be happy again. I'll be able to laugh and enjoy life. And it was those other people that I've met along the way who've had some terrible things happen to them. And through their journey, they've done some fairly amazing things as well. So my intent about the book originally was to focus on other people. And in all fairness, you know, during that COVID lockdown period, I really didn't think people would remember who I was, and I didn't think there would be enough interest in my journey to put it all into a book. So I met with Sue Smethurst last year, and she expressed interest in helping me write this book. But when she started interviewing me and working with me, she decided to take it into the direction it now is, which is a book about my journey, a memoir over the last 10 years, but also combining other people's stories. And you know, I think the message of hope really comes through from these other people's stories as well. They are fairly confronting and uncomfortable to read, but you learn so much through that and come out. I think a lot of people tell me they read the book and they couldn't put it down. So I'm very thankful for them trusting me to be able to share their stories in within that. So there's a bit of a combination there, which I feel very comfortable, and particularly, you know, some Aboriginal women that I met in Alice Springs, the Taganjeri town camp women, they had a huge impact on me, and they embraced me into their community in such a open and genuine way that I've never forgotten. And it was really great to be able to include them in my book because of the, you know, what an impact they'd had on me too.
Thank you. Rosie, we did receive some questions from the audience before tonight, and if it's okay with you, I just want to move into a couple of them.
I want to actually, before we go on to that, you know, some of my recovery, which I think is important to talk about, you know, is finding something that you can enjoy, finding something that you can immerse yourself in. And some of that was walking. Yes. So for me, I have really always wanted to do some great walks around the world. And I've just recently come back, last year I was walking in Cornwall. So for me, a lot of my recovery, I really feel, has been with the companionship of some good friends, trekking, particularly in the UK, because that is my birth country and it's a beautiful place to be. But to go through and challenging yourself physically, because I'm not the fittest and I'm not the most nimble, and I'm certainly not as young as I once was. But those opportunities that I've been able to create has really nourished me, given me something to look forward to, an experience that I've really felt has been a really important part of my journey. And I share that because I think, you know, a lot of us that do walk realise it's a really great way of healing and recovery in ways that, you know, sometimes it's hard to explain why. Yeah. But anyway, now the questions.
No, and you know, you've just answered the question, because the first question was...
I just wanted to get in about my trekking.
You know, there was a few themed questions from the audience. What helped most in overcoming your grief and maintaining hope? And clearly throughout the book, you know, having activities like walking. And walking was important to you before Luke, you had goals?
Because it was funny actually, coming from England and living on a farm. In England we have the ramblers, and my dad used to get so irritated with them because in England you can walk across people's land, you probably know. ancient pathways. So if you're a farmer, sometimes that's not what you want.
Yeah.
But I was never. So yeah, I've always loved. The Yorkshire Dales are an area that
Beautiful area. I've been there myself.
and that's close to my heart, and that's close to my family. Kind of come from in those areas as well. So yeah. So I'm not sure where my next trekking adventure is going to be, but it may well be back in the UK.
Nice. So I'm mindful of time. We're going to be wrapping up in about 10 minutes. I just want to touch on a couple more questions. And we've got a really interesting national debate at the moment on domestic and family violence. And Rosie and I have had several conversations about the national debate, and it can be tiresome. You get new people pop up with what they will claim to be new ideas, and for many of us who have been in the sector and involved in this advocacy for many years, we try to stay optimistic, but we can't help but roll our eyes and go, we've seen it all before. And we have, Rosie, we have seen it all before, and we've seen a lot of change. You supported us here in South Australia at the end of last year in our call for a Royal Commission. We're really thankful that our government, our Premier, took that up. We've got the incredible Natasha Scott-Despoja as our Commissioner, who also wrote the foreword to your book, and I know is a good friend of yours. What do we need to be doing here as community members in South Australia in order to make the most of this Royal Commission? And obviously you had your experiences in Victoria. We know the Commission will be as good as the information it gets. But through your 10 years since the Royal Commission in Victoria, we're about to embark on ours here in South Australia. What advice would you give us as a community as we go through this process over the next 12 months?
What advice? Well, I would say make your government accountable to deliver on its recommendations and fund it.
Yeah.
And that's what you can do, make them really support it, get behind it, and decently fund it.
Yeah.
And I think that a Royal Commission is a great opportunity, but it's only if the recommendations are implemented and only if those implementations are given adequate funding. And really, in all seriousness, that's exactly what our Victorian government did 10 years ago, or as good as 10 years ago. So we still haven't got the perfect systemic response. We've still got a long way to go, but we are, it's a very different experience for victim survivors in Victoria than any other state. We have learnt a lot. It's been a very difficult journey to get to where we are now. We're still learning a lot, but we did have that government. We had the political leadership, we had the government funding, we had the government push. But like everything, now we've got a state with no money. And so it's still a significant issue, and we're still having to really agitate and force political attention again. So it's something that's going to be a constant, I think, for a long time.
Absolutely. Look, and we are sitting in a state with some strong foundations, particularly around law reform. We are embarking on the criminalisation of coercive control. We've had some education pieces out to the community. I think for us, there's lots of good projects happening, but it's about that interconnection. It's about the integration of the service system. And I know in Victoria, the woman's experience in terms of that investment. So it's not just the specialist services, generalised services know how to recognise and respond to domestic violence as well. And all government departments and agencies recognise it is a responsibility. Did you see a change in terms of other ministers realising that DV was their responsibility, and departments and non-government agencies as well? Is that ongoing, Rosie?
Oh, yeah, it's ongoing. I mean, you've got ministers that change, you've got different portfolios that come through. This is just something that women's services have to constantly fight for, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't end, it doesn't stop, it doesn't slow down.
Yeah.
You're always vying for wanting more funding, more money. So, yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't...
It's always going to be. Bringing us back now to your book and in wrapping up this evening, thank you so much for flying into South Australia and sharing your experiences with us. What is your hope for the book? And I know when I shared reading it.
I just want people to get something from reading it, whatever that is.
Yeah.
You know, I've never, you know, my first book is a bestseller, and I never expected that. And what means more than anything is when people will still say, I got your book, I learned so much from your book, I've gifted your book, I bought it for somebody else, and it's made me really deeply understand family violence in a way that I never did before. Or when you have a journey of family violence, you relate to it, and it speaks to you in ways that you need. So I'm hoping that this book is exactly the same. You know, I don't care how many I sell. I don't need to sell many. I just want people to open its pages and you know, enjoy reading it, gain something from it, whatever that may be for you personally. My dad wasn't that impressed. He's a hard man to impress, I'll tell you. I was impressed he actually read it. I was impressed he actually read it. But yeah, so, you know, it's not everybody will be drawn to want to read the book, but I hope that those that do gain a lot from it. I'm thrilled with what Sue's done. You know, she's really taken my story, taken my experience. She's done an amazing amount of research. I could never have pulled it off and brought it together without her. She's done a wonderful job. It is of me in ways that I think, you know, a really important relationship with somebody else that can write it with you and for you.
Absolutely.
So you know, it does reflect over that journey. There are some key moments that are going to, you know, and to be frank, it was bloody hard because I could barely remember anything. Yeah. So, you know, it was difficult at times going into trying to work out so much of the detail. And so that was prickly for Sue at times when she was trying to get me to think about things that I probably would have preferred not to. But I'm really proud of the book. I really think everybody who I had wanted I wanted their approval. Everybody that I know has read the book, have been, you know, got a lot from it, and I think that's enough for me. That's enough for me.
Rosie, thank you. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for giving us hopes in times of despair. Thank you for your courage and the impact. Australia is a different place because of you, and you made a choice to bring this conversation out into the public narrative, and you do it with so much courage, so much conviction. I know I speak on behalf of my sector colleagues and friends. You give us hope to keep doing the hard graft on the front line, and I know you bring hope to families who are going through similar experiences. Thank you for your time this evening. Rosie Batty, everybody.
Thank you. And thank you. Adelaide has been such a lovely, supportive place that I visited many, many times over the last 10 years. And I really appreciate you coming tonight. Actually, it's bloody warm out here, isn't it? I have come from Melbourne, I will say, and I'm like, wow. But yeah, thank you so much. And I hope that person is okay.
Yeah. We've got a thumbs up in the back here. The person is okay.
Makes me feel much better.
I know. I think we're both a little bit on edge.
I don't usually have that effect on anybody.
Yeah. So Rosie's book is available to purchase this evening, and Rosie will be signing as we conclude the event. Also, I've got to do the plug for the Zahra Foundation. We rely so generously on the support of the South Australian community in terms of fundraising. So please use the QR code tonight. Oh my God, I'm a little bit tired. To jump onto our website, learn about the work we do, and if you can support us, we'd be incredibly grateful of that. Thank you for turning out tonight, and once again, thank you, Rosie, for your time,
thank you,
wisdom,
Kellyanne,
and generosity.